Buying my first house was an exciting adventure, and I couldn't believe my luck when I found a charming older home within my budget. It had a unique allure, but it didn't take long for me to discover its secrets. The house, located at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, exuded an old-world charm. It was a two-story Victorian-style dwelling with intricate wooden trim, a welcoming front porch, and a large, overgrown garden. In the basement, a locked door piqued my curiosity. The old-fashioned keyhole seemed out of place, especially since the real estate agent had no knowledge of this locked room. When I inquired about it, he shrugged it off, insisting it must be an old storage space. My curiosity got the best of me, and I hired a locksmith to open the mysterious door. The room inside was like a time capsule, filled with antique toys, dusty furniture, and faded portraits of children. One portrait was eerily reminiscent of the real estate agent. This discovery sent chills down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as I explored the room. I decided to put the strange findings aside, attributing my unease to the house's age. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the house began to change. Unexplainable sounds, like children's laughter and distant footsteps, filled the house at night. Shadows darted across my peripheral vision, and I often found myself pausing, convinced someone was behind me, though no one ever was. The secret of the locked room was far from charming. It was as if I had unwittingly unlocked a Pandora's box of haunting and unexplainable events, and my first home had turned into a nightmare. Every creak and rustle in the house felt like a malevolent presence, lurking just out of sight, waiting for something I couldn't comprehend. My once beloved home had become a place of unrelenting dread, and the answers to its dark mysteries remained tantalizingly out of reach. Little did I know that the horrors of that room were only the beginning of the terrors that awaited me in my new house. My name is Alex, and this is the story of the house my wife, Brittany, and I bought last summer. We were excited to finally find our dream home, a charming two-story house with a white picket fence nestled on a quiet street. It was the perfect place to start our new life together, away from the noise and commotion of the city. The house was built in the 1970s, and while it didn't have the modern amenities of some newer homes, it had a unique character and a warm, welcoming feel. We fell in love with it the moment we walked through the front door, feeling the potential for our future as we explored each room. The sellers were an elderly couple, the Wilsons, who had lived there for decades. They told us stories of raising their children in the house and shared their favorite memories. It was evident that they cherished the place, and we promised to take good care of it. With the deal finalized, we couldn't wait to move in and begin our life in our new home. The first few months in our new home were blissful. Brittany and I spent our days fixing up the place, making it our own. We painted the walls, planted flowers in the front garden, and even installed a cozy fireplace in the living room. The house felt like it was truly ours, and we were settling into our small, friendly neighborhood. However, as the autumn leaves fell, things started to change. It all began with the strange noises. At night, we'd hear creaks and rustling sounds, which we initially attributed to the house's age. But these noises became more frequent, and we couldn't ignore them any longer. Sometimes it felt like faint whispers were echoing through the walls. One evening, I was working in the study when I distinctly heard my name being whispered.
Alex.
I called out, thinking it was Brittany trying to get my attention. When I walked into the living room, Brittany looked puzzled, saying she hadn't called me. We laughed it off as stress from the move, but the whispers continued. They never made any sense, just random words and phrases. We also noticed shadows moving in the corners of our eyes when we were alone in a room. We tried to chalk it up to our imaginations, but deep down we both felt uneasy about what was happening in our charming new home. One evening, as Brittany and I prepared dinner in the cozy kitchen, a new and unsettling event occurred. A series of loud bangs echoed from the basement below. It sounded as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor, and it sent shivers down our spines. We exchanged nervous glances, our knuckles turning white as we gripped our knives.
Stay here,
I whispered to Brittany, setting my knife down and cautiously making my way to the basement door. The wooden steps seemed to groan with each step I took. My heart pounded in my chest. When I reached the basement landing and flicked on the light, I was met with an eerie sight. There, in the dimly lit basement, were rows of old, dusty mirrors, each one facing the other. They reflected back and forth in an infinite corridor of images. The room seemed to stretch on forever. I couldn't understand why these mirrors were here. We had no use for them, and they weren't there when we moved in. The strange occurrences in our home had become too much to bear, and I couldn't deny that something sinister lurked in the corners of our quaint, charming house. As Brittany and I tried to unravel the mystery of these whispers, shadows, and the ominous mirrors in our home, our dreams of an idyllic life in our new house began to fade. This event happened a few years ago. I'm an average guy who recently bought an old fixer-upper in a quiet neighborhood. It was a fantastic deal, and I saw the potential behind the shabby exterior. I was excited about renovating it and turning it into my dream home. After a few weeks of hard work, I'd already made some noticeable improvements. The living room was coming together with a fresh coat of paint, and I'd ripped out the old, worn-out carpet to reveal beautiful hardwood floors. The kitchen, although outdated, was functional and had a vintage charm I appreciated, but like any old house, there were quirks. One sunny afternoon, as I was inspecting the crawl space, I discovered something odd. Beneath the house, there was an area that was much larger than I'd anticipated. It seemed like someone had fashioned a makeshift living space there. Cautiously, I descended into the crawl space, the dim light of my flashlight revealing the odd assortment of items strewn about. My heart raced as I realized that someone had been living here, a homeless person by the looks of it. There was an old mattress, its springs creaking beneath my touch, and a few tattered blankets heaped in one corner. A pile of empty food containers and a few discarded clothing items were evidence of a human presence. I shivered, partially from the cold, but more from fear and uncertainty. I wasn't alone in this house. The realization that a stranger had been living beneath my home, right under my nose, sent chills down my spine. What was even more unsettling was that I had no idea how long this had been going on. I took a deep breath and slowly backed out of the crawl space, sealing it shut as I left. My thoughts raced, torn between calling the police and a sudden overwhelming sense of empathy for the person who'd been living there. As I resealed the crawl space, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to act quickly. The idea of living under the same roof as a complete stranger, especially one who had been hiding beneath my home, sent shivers down my spine. But I also knew that I couldn't simply ignore the situation. That night, as I lay in bed, the creaks and groans of an old house took on a sinister quality. Every sound was amplified in the silence of my fear. Sleep was elusive. The following day, I decided to head back into the crawl space, this time with my phone ready to call the police. I needed to confront the intruder, or at least let them know that I was aware of their presence. I was determined to handle the situation, although I was apprehensive about what might happen. As I descended into the dark, cramped space, my flashlight beam revealed the same haphazard arrangement of belongings. My heart pounded in my chest as I took cautious steps forward. Then from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was the homeless man, disheveled and wild-eyed, who I'd glimpsed briefly before. His sunken cheeks and unkempt beard made him appear more like a ghost than a real person.
Hey!
I called out, my voice trembling.
You need to leave. This is my house.
The man's response was chillingly unpredictable. With a feral growl, he lunged at me, his eyes filled with a desperation that transcended words. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled backward, tripping over a box of old pipes. Instinct took over as adrenaline coursed through my veins. I managed to push the man away and scramble to my feet. My phone was in my hand, and I dialed 911 as I raced out of the crawl space. I didn't look back to see if he was pursuing me. I just knew I had to escape. I burst out into the daylight, gasping for breath. Within minutes, the police arrived and I led them back to the crawl space. The officers apprehended the homeless man who was still crouched in the darkness. They secured him and calmed him down, assuring him that he wouldn't be harmed. The experience was harrowing, and it took me a while to regain my composure. The homeless man was taken into custody, and it turned out he had been living beneath my house for several weeks. He was given the help he needed, and I had my house to myself once more. It was an ordeal I'd never imagined when I bought the place.